Have you ever been handed something that looked like a gift, but left your heart feeling heavier, not lighter? We're taught to receive with grace, to say thank you even when something doesn't sit right in our spirit. But what if not every gift is meant to be received? What if some gifts are actually traps, cleverly disguised, emotionally charged offers that twist our sense of worth, peace, and boundaries? It's a difficult truth, but a necessary one. Some gifts are not expressions of love or generosity. Some are tools for control, guilt, and shame, and too often we accept them because we don't want to appear ungrateful, rude, or difficult. But in doing so, we trade our authenticity for approval. This message isn't about becoming skeptical or hard-hearted. It's about learning to discern. It's about recognizing when something given to you, be it forgiveness, help, affection, or even advice, comes with hidden conditions or emotional price tags. Because real gifts, the ones worth embracing, come with freedom, not fear. They build connection, not debt. They allow space for your voice, your story, and your dignity. So today, we explore the uncomfortable but freeing truth about the gifts you should never accept. Not because you're too proud, but because your peace is too precious. Not because you lack grace, but because you finally understand what grace really looks like. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most powerful gift you can give yourself. Are you ready to open your eyes before you open your hands? When someone offers you help, advice, or even a material gift, it can feel like an act of kindness on the surface. But sometimes, underneath that surface, there's something else, a feeling, a twist in your gut. A moment of hesitation where your body knows before your mind catches up asterisk, this doesn't feel right asterisk. That's often how shame makes its entrance, disguised as a favor, hidden inside something that looks generous. Shame is one of the most corrosive emotions we carry. It's the voice that tells us we're not enough, that we're unworthy, unlovable, or flawed. And the most painful thing about shame is that it often doesn't come from our own thoughts alone. It's handed to us, sometimes wrapped in concern, in help, in gifts. Someone gives you something you didn't ask for, a critique, a warning, a just trying to help kind of comment, and it lands in a way that makes you question your own value. That's not generosity, that's control. Think about how many times someone has said, "I'm just trying to help," and you felt smaller afterward. Maybe it was unsolicited advice about your parenting, your career, your appearance, your relationship. Maybe it was money offered with an eye roll or a heavy sigh. Maybe it was a backhanded compliment masked as support. These are not harmless gifts. These are messages that whisper, asterisk, you're not doing this right. You're not capable on your own. You're only acceptable if you do it my way. Asterisk, it's important to understand that true hell, real, grounded generosity, does not shame the receiver. It empowers, it lifts, it offers dignity. It meets you where you are, not from above but beside. And when someone gives from that place, you feel seen, not judged. But when shame is involved, you don't feel seen. You feel watched. Watched for mistakes, watched for how you respond. Watch to see if you now owe something in return. One of the ways shame shows up in disguised gifts is through subtle comparisons. You might hear things like, "When I was your age, I already had a house." Or, "I just don't want you to end up making the same mistakes I did." It may sound like wisdom, but it can carry the hidden message, asterisk, you've already failed. Asterisk, and the worst part is, if you accept that kind of gift without questioning it, you begin to internalize the shame it delivers. You start adjusting your choices, your voice, your behavior, not from your own truth, but from fear of further judgment. It's hard to reject something that's presented as kindness. Most of us were raised to be polite, to say thank you, to be grateful. But we weren't always taught how to discern between a gift that honors us and a gift that diminishes us. And the truth is, saying no to shame doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you aware. It means you are paying attention to the way people give, not just to what they give. Because sometimes a gift is not about what's in the box, it's about what it makes you believe about yourself. Learning to recognize shame in disguise is not about assuming bad intent. People often pass along shame because it was handed to them, too. But that doesn't mean you have to keep the cycle going. You can notice it, name it, and set it down. You can receive love without shame, help without judgment, and care without condition. And you can do that by listening closely to how something makes you feel, not just what it looks like on the outside. Conditional love is one of the most dangerous and deceptive gifts we can ever receive. At first glance, it might look like care, attention, or even affection, but the deeper you go, the more you begin to realize that the warmth only lasts as long as you meet someone's expectations. This kind of love doesn't celebrate who you are. It negotiates with who you could be if you changed enough to earn it. Conditional love shows up in our lives quietly. It comes from parents, partners, friends, mentors, even society. It's the compliment that comes with a critique. Asterisk, you're doing great, just don't speak up so much. Asterisk, it's the affection that disappears the moment you say no or set a boundary. It's the friendship that evaporates when you stop being the fixer, the listener, the one who sacrifices. Over time, you learn to perform. You start editing your truth, shaping your identity to avoid rejection, and in the process, you lose touch with your authenticity. What makes conditional love feel like a gift is that it often comes wrapped in approval. You're praised when you're agreeable, rewarded when you comply, and reassured when you align yourself with someone else's needs. But what's happening beneath the surface is more complex. You're being trained, sometimes unintentionally, to value acceptance over self-respect. You begin to believe that your worth is tied to your behavior, your silence, your success, your service. Love becomes something you earn, not something you receive freely. This experience is deeply rooted in fear. The fear of being too much or not enough. The fear of being abandoned if you dare to show your true self. And that fear is what keeps conditional love alive. It thrives in environments where vulnerability is unsafe and perfection is demanded. The moment you express an unpopular opinion or show your imperfections or assert your needs, you watch the connection weaken. You feel the cold space growing between you and the other person, and that emotional distance becomes punishment. That's not love. It's emotional compliance. We don't always recognize conditional love for what it is because many of us grew up inside of it. We were taught to behave in ways that would please others, to not rock the boat, to avoid conflict at all costs. So when someone says, asterisk, I care about you, but only when you agree with me, asterisk, it feels familiar, and we confuse familiarity with safety. But conditional love is not safe. It teaches us to abandon ourselves. It tells us that belonging requires betrayal of the self. The tragedy of conditional love is that it can look stable on the outside. People stay in relationships for years under these terms. They learn to shrink, to settle, to silence parts of themselves to keep the peace. But deep inside, there's resentment, grief, and a quiet sense of suffocation. You can't thrive in love that only permits half of you to show up. Real love, on the other hand, holds space for your whole self. It allows disagreement, it welcomes change, it doesn't withdraw when you grow, and that's how you know it's real. It's not threatened by your truth. It doesn't vanish when you say no. It doesn't require you to earn it over and over again. It simply shows up, stays curious, and makes room for your humanity. Choosing not to accept conditional love isn't easy. It might mean facing conflict, setting boundaries, or even walking away. But it is one of the most courageous and self-affirming things you can do. Because the love you accept sets the tone for how you treat yourself, and you deserve love that doesn't keep score. You deserve connection that honors your full presence, not just the version of you someone else prefers. Toxic positivity is one of the most deceptive gifts we can receive. It comes wrapped in good intentions, in smiles, in catchphrases that sound supportive, Just think happy thoughts. At least it's not worse. Or everything happens for a reason. On the surface, it looks like encouragement. But when we open it, we often find dismissal, avoidance, and emotional isolation. Toxic positivity denies the full spectrum of human emotion, and in doing so, denies us the right to be human. When someone gives us toxic positivity, they're often trying to protect themselves from discomfort, not support us through ours. They're not actually sitting with our pain. They're stepping over it with optimism. This is not empathy. This is emotional bypassing, and it leaves the recipient feeling unseen, unheard, and often more alone than before the support arrived. It's important to understand the difference between real hope and toxic positivity. Hope acknowledges pain and still believes in possibility. It says, yes, this is hard, and I believe you will move through it. Toxic positivity skips the yes, this is hard part. It rushes straight to the silver lining, ignoring the storm. It tells you to smile before you've even had a chance to cry. One of the most damaging things about toxic positivity is that it teaches people to suppress their real emotions. We start to believe that expressing sadness, anger, fear, or grief is wrong, that we should be stronger, more grateful, more cheerful. But emotional strength doesn't come from pretending. It comes from processing. When we feel pressure to stay positive in the face of real struggle, we often push our emotions underground where they don't disappear. They fester. This kind of positivity can show up in friendships, workplaces, families, even in our inner dialogue. When someone says, "It could be worse," what they may mean is, "I don't know how to hold space for what you're feeling." When a manager tells an overwhelmed employee, "Just be grateful you have a job," that's not support. That's silence in disguise. It tells the person that their burnout, frustration, or anxiety isn't valid. That's not leadership. That's emotional invalidation. We are wired for connection, and true connection requires vulnerability. But toxic positivity breaks that connection by dismissing what makes us vulnerable in the first place. If I can't bring my whole self, my joy and my pain to a conversation, then I'm not being accepted. I'm being filtered, and this isn't just about other people giving us toxic positivity. It's also about how we treat ourselves. How often do we shame ourselves for feeling low? How many times do we try to self-motivate with "you should be happy"? Instead of saying, "It's okay to feel this right now," self-compassion starts with allowing our emotions, not controlling them. Education and emotional awareness play a huge role in changing this dynamic. When we begin to recognize toxic positivity for what it is, we can start to set boundaries around it. We can say, "I know you're trying to help, but right now I just need someone to listen." We can gently guide conversations back to empathy, to presence, to honesty. Because the truth is, we don't need to be rescued from our emotions. We need to be accompanied in them. We need someone to sit with us in the discomfort, not to fix it, not to sugarcoat it, but simply to acknowledge it. That's what real support looks like. So the next time someone offers you a smile that erases your sadness, or hands you a motivational quote when you're grieving, recognize it for what it is, and give yourself permission to say, "That's not what I need right now." Unsolicited guilt often arrives in moments disguised as generosity. It's the kind of gift that appears kind on the surface, a favor, a helping hand, or a thoughtful gesture, but carries a hidden expectation. The moment you accept it, a weight settles in your chest. You didn't ask for this, you didn't need it, yet now you feel indebted. That is the power of guilt, silently folded into something that should feel good but doesn't. At the heart of unsolicited guilt is manipulation dressed as kindness. It's when someone gives with the intention of creating obligation, not connection. They might not say it out loud, but the message is clear. Asterisk, you owe me now. Asterisk, this dynamic is subtle. It doesn't always come with raised voices or bold declarations. Often, it whispers through glances, passive comments, or well-timed reminders. You may hear things like, asterisk, after all I've done for you, asterisk or asterisk, I guess I just care more than most people. Asterisk, these are phrases laced with guilt, designed to make you feel like the bad person if you don't reciprocate in a way that meets their unspoken demands. What makes unsolicited guilt so harmful is that it bypasses choice. In healthy relationships, giving and receiving flow freely and without conditions. There is room for gratitude, but not pressure. When guilt enters the equation, the energy shifts. The gift is no longer about care. It becomes a tool to leverage behavior. It erodes your ability to set boundaries because to say no now feels ungrateful or worse, unloving. You begin to measure your worth by how much you can repay rather than by who you are. Guilt like this teaches us to perform rather than to connect. It makes authenticity feel dangerous. Instead of responding with honesty asterisk, I can't right now asterisk or asterisk that doesn't feel right for me asterisk, you respond with compliance. You do what's expected, not because you want to, but because you're afraid of disappointing someone who gave you something they never should have used as currency. In some families and friendships, this pattern is generational. You may grow up learning that love has a price, that being close means being indebted, that every act of kindness is a score that will be tallied later. And so, when someone hands you a gift, a favor, or even their time, your first instinct isn't appreciation, it's anxiety. What will this cost me later? That's not how giving is supposed to feel. What makes it even more complex is that the person doing the giving might not even realize they're doing it. They might genuinely believe they're being helpful or supportive. But if their generosity creates obligation, pressure, or fear, it's not generosity, it's control. Emotional health requires that we examine the intention behind giving, not just the act itself. When you feel guilt creeping in after receiving something, ask yourself, did I truly need or ask for this? Was it given freely or with an expectation? And most importantly, do I feel more connected or more constrained after receiving it? These questions bring clarity. They help separate true support from disguised manipulation. You are allowed to set boundaries around what you receive just as much as what you give. You are allowed to say, asterisk thank you, but I can't accept this, asterisk if the gift compromises your autonomy. You are not ungrateful. You are not selfish. You are simply choosing to honor your emotional space, because gifts given with strings are not gifts. They are contracts you never agreed to. And your worth is not measured by your willingness to carry someone else's expectations under the name of kindness. Control is a subtle force. It doesn't always come with loud demands or raised voices. Sometimes it comes softly, masked as kindness. It shows up in our lives as someone offering help, thoughtful, convenient, seemingly generous. But as we lean into that help, we feel it, the quiet expectation that we now owe something. That's the moment we must pay attention, because not all help is helpful. Sometimes help is the costume control wears to get in the door. Control masquerading as help is especially hard to detect because it's wrapped in good intentions. It's someone offering to guide your career, but only if you agree to follow their exact path. It's someone giving you advice about your relationship, but only if you align your decisions with what makes them feel comfortable. It's that family member who insists they're helping you grow, but somehow, every time you follow their advice, you feel smaller, not bigger. The challenge with this kind of gift is the emotional confusion it creates. On the surface, it feels like support. You tell yourself, I should be grateful, they care, but deep down, there's discomfort. You feel a quiet pressure to comply. You feel like your autonomy is being traded for their approval. And because it was wrapped in the language of care, it becomes harder to speak up. If you reject the help, you're seen as ungrateful. If you accept it, you feel compromised. It's a lose-lose, but only if you don't recognize what's really happening. At its core, control disguised as help is rooted in fear, not just the giver's fear of losing influence, but often our fear of being seen as rude, ungrateful, or incapable. And when we don't address that fear, we accept things that chip away at our self-trust. We begin to believe that other people know what's best for us. We start living lives that reflect their comfort zones, not our calling. It's important to distinguish between true support and covert control. Real help doesn't hijack your decisions, it honors them. It doesn't shrink your voice, it amplifies it. Real help says, here's what I can offer, but you make the call. That's partnership, that's respect. That's love. One of the most dangerous effects of this disguised control is how it subtly trains us to second-guess ourselves. Over time, we lose touch with our own compass. We hesitate before making choices because we're worried about how others will react. We seek permission, not clarity. We move from self-leadership to self-doubt, all because we accepted help that came with conditions we couldn't see at first. To build emotional resilience, we have to create boundaries around the kinds of help we accept. That means asking, does this support strengthen my agency or weaken it? Does this advice respect who I am or try to change me into someone else? Those questions act like filters, allowing only what aligns with your growth to pass through. Saying no to help that manipulates is not a betrayal. It's an act of self-protection, and it doesn't require conflict. It just requires clarity. You can say, thank you, but I've got this, and mean it. You can decline help without guilt when you understand that your life is not a project for someone else to manage. It's a story only you can write. There's nothing wrong with accepting support. We all need connection. But support that demands obedience, that expects silent gratitude, or that conditions love on compliance, that's not support. That's control wearing a friendly face. And once we see it for what it is, we don't have to accept it anymore. We often think of gifts as symbols of affection, acts of generosity meant to strengthen our relationships. But sometimes, a gift isn't about you at all. It's about the person giving it, about what they want to prove, about how they want to be seen, or about the subtle narrative they're crafting. This is especially true when the gift comes from a place of silent competition. Silent competition isn't loud. It doesn't show up in grand, obvious gestures or dramatic confrontations. Instead, it's the quiet comparison that hides beneath the surface of a seemingly kind act. It's the friend who brings an expensive birthday present and casually mentions the price in front of others. It's the relative who offers help, but only in front of an audience. It's the colleague who contributes to your project, but never lets anyone forget their role. And it's the person who insists on giving, not because they want to lift you, but because they want to appear bigger than you. These gifts are rarely about love or care. They are about hierarchy, power. Status, they are performances, deliberate moves in a game you didn't even know you were playing. And when you accept them without awareness, you often feel something strange afterward. Not gratitude, not warmth, but smallness. Discomfort, a sense that somehow, without intending it, you've fallen behind. The trap is that it's hard to name. You may tell yourself you're being ungrateful, that it's not a big deal, that you're reading too much into it. But your body knows the difference between a gift given freely and a gift meant to place you in someone's debt. A real gift makes you feel seen. A competitive one makes you feel evaluated. What makes this kind of gift so damaging is its subtlety. It creates an unspoken pressure to match or outdo. It turns giving into a scoreboard. Instead of building connection, it builds resentment. You may start second, guessing yourself. Do I need to give back something equally valuable? Am I now obligated? Do they think they're better than me? Over time, these exchanges chip away at authenticity. They create dynamics where people give not from the heart, but from strategy, where relationships become performances instead of safe places, where generosity becomes a power play, and it's not always malicious. Sometimes people give competitively because that's how they learned to measure worth, because they fear not being needed, because they confuse being admired with being loved. But intentions don't always protect us from impact. The key is not to reject every generous gesture, but to stay rooted in self-awareness. Ask yourself, how do I feel receiving this? Do I feel valued? Or do I feel managed? Is this a gift or is it a move? You don't owe anyone your discomfort just to protect their ego. You don't have to keep playing a game just because someone else insists on keeping score. And you certainly don't need to earn your place in a relationship by accepting gifts that come with fine print. A healthy gift nurtures connection. It doesn't impose expectation. It doesn't create debt. It doesn't seek recognition or repayment. It simply says, I see you, I value you, and this is for you, not for me. So the next time someone gives you something, and you sense that whisper of competition underneath, pay attention. Not everything that's wrapped with a bow is meant to bless you. Some gifts are really just masks for insecurity, handed to you so someone else can feel superior. And you have the right to say, no, thank you. When someone hands you their pain, it can feel like a sacred moment. There's a vulnerability in sharing a story, a trauma, or a hardship. It's part of our human experience to carry one another through difficult times. But there's a line, a quiet, often invisible line, between holding space for someone and being asked to carry what isn't ours to hold. Emotional burdens are not always offered with malice. Often, they're passed along unconsciously, out of fear, avoidance, or an inability to self-regulate. But when someone consistently makes you responsible for their healing while refusing to take any steps on their own, you are not being trusted. You are being used as a container for their unresolved pain. We see this in relationships where one person becomes the emotional anchor for the other. They expect you to always be available, always be the one to soothe, to validate, to rescue. They call it connection, but it's dependency. They say they need you, but what they really need is accountability for their own growth, their own trauma, their own recovery. And if you ever dare to set a boundary or express exhaustion, you're met with guilt or blame. The message is clear. You are here to fix me, and if you won't, you're abandoning me. That's not connection. That's emotional outsourcing. It's the belief that someone else should carry what we refuse to unpack. When we accept that burden without question, we are slowly pulled away from ourselves. We begin to confuse empathy with enmeshment, support with sacrifice. We start prioritizing someone else's pain over our own needs, even our own truth. And here's the danger: over time, you begin to lose your sense of emotional clarity. You no longer know where their grief ends and your responsibility begins. There's a difference between being a safe place and being a dumping ground. Healthy emotional exchange is mutual. It allows for holding and releasing, for support and space. But when someone refuses to process their feelings and instead expects you to feel them, hold them, and carry them, you are not being honored. You are being drained. It's especially common in situations where the other person has not done the work to sit with their own discomfort. So instead of facing it, they hand it to you. You're the one who always has to understand, always has to apologize, always has to navigate the storm. And they call you strong for doing it, while never learning how to stand on their own. That's not love. That's an imbalance masquerading as intimacy. Emotional labor is real, and it is not endlessly renewable. When you carry someone else's emotions more than your own, resentment takes root. You feel tired, but can't say why. You feel overwhelmed, but you don't want to seem unsupportive. So you keep accepting this gift of emotional burden, not realizing that each time you're stepping a little further away from your own inner peace. Refusing this kind of gift doesn't make you unkind. It makes you aware that healing is a personal journey, and while we can walk beside someone, we cannot walk asterisk for asterisk them. We are not responsible for processing pain we did not cause, especially when the person handing it to us refuses to do their part. Compassion is powerful, but without boundaries, it becomes self-abandonment. There's something deeply unsettling about receiving a gift that feels more like a test than a gesture. Sometimes it arrives with the words, "I forgive you," and at first it seems like a relief, but the energy behind it says something different. Instead of feeling lighter, you feel smaller, exposed, or even indebted. That's not forgiveness. It's a quiet form of dominance disguised as healing. This kind of forgiveness isn't meant to rebuild trust or repair connection. It's designed to remind you of your place, to subtly reinforce someone else's moral high ground. Genuine forgiveness is one of the most powerful expressions of emotional courage. It comes from a place of deep understanding, vulnerability, and a willingness to let go, not just for the other person, but for one's own peace. But fake forgiveness wears a mask. It pretends to be generous, but it's fundamentally transactional. It says, "I'm choosing to rise above you," rather than, "I see your pain and I'm choosing connection." You can often recognize fake forgiveness by how it's delivered. It doesn't feel like a dialogue, it feels like a verdict. There's no space for your voice or your truth. The person forgiving you doesn't ask, "How did we get here?" or "What do you need to feel safe again?" Instead, they make a declaration that serves their narrative. And sometimes you're even expected to thank them for it. That's the subtle trap. You're being told that the past is behind you, but it's clear that the resentment still lingers in the room like heavy air. This kind of forgiveness becomes a power move, especially in relationships where vulnerability is already scarce. It becomes a tool to remind you of your mistakes, while the other person gets to wear the crown of grace. But true forgiveness is mutual. It requires humility from both sides. It's messy. It doesn't come with the certainty of being done or the neatness of a final bow. It requires ongoing conversation, not silent superiority. What happens when we accept fake forgiveness is that we start to doubt ourselves. We wonder if we're too sensitive for feeling hurt, even though the situation never really honored our emotions. We may even begin to internalize guilt we no longer need to carry. That's the real danger of accepting this gift. It keeps us locked in a dynamic where one person holds the emotional authority, while the other is left to tiptoe around unresolved pain. There's also a subtle emotional debt that builds when fake forgiveness enters the relationship. You're expected to behave as if everything is fine. You're supposed to move on quickly, prove your loyalty, be grateful. But beneath that is an unspoken rule: don't bring it up again. Don't question my version of the story. Don't make this uncomfortable, and that silence becomes its own form of suffering. The truth is, we can't heal in spaces that only allow us to be forgiven but not heard. We can't grow in relationships where grace is used as a reminder of our inferiority. And we certainly can't thrive when we're given a gift that's really just a mirror of someone else's need for control. So while forgiveness should be a gift, it's not always one you should accept, at least not without discernment. It's okay to step back and ask, is this really about healing, or is it about power? Is this person meeting me as an equal or positioning themselves above me? When the answer points to imbalance, it's not ungrateful to reject that gift, it's wise. It means you understand the difference between peace and pretense, between reconciliation and submission. As we move forward, it's essential to remember that rejecting these gifts doesn't make us unkind or ungrateful. It makes us wise. The act of setting boundaries is an act of self-respect. By refusing to accept gifts that come with strings attached, we create space for relationships that nurture us, for connections that are grounded in mutual respect and understanding. It's through this process that we cultivate the emotional courage to choose what truly serves our well-being. We all deserve to be seen for who we truly are, not for who others want us to be. We deserve to receive love and support that is free of manipulation or hidden expectations. The gifts we accept should empower us to grow, not limit us in any way. When we choose not to accept those emotionally burdensome gifts, we reclaim our power and restore our sense of self-worth. In the end, the most valuable gift we can give ourselves is the ability to recognize what is real and what is false, what is nurturing and what is draining. We don't need to accept everything that's offered. Sometimes saying no is the kindest thing we can do, not just for ourselves, but for the relationships we cherish. By doing so, we create a space where true generosity and connection can flourish, and that, after all, is the gift that will nourish us for a lifetime.